Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to look at an introduction to English criticism. Before we begin, I would like you all to go through this book of the same name, An Introduction to English Criticism by B. Prasad, because that is where all my references are coming from for this video and the subsequent videos as well. So what is criticism? One of the first questions that anyone asks is, what is criticism? Why do we need criticism? Well, why not simply enjoy literature just for the sake of it? Well, as a layman, you may enjoy literature without really going into the profundity of any literary work. Just simply enjoy it for its own sake, and there is no harm in it. But there is another way of enjoying literature, and that would be critically. So there are two kinds of people. One as a layman, two kinds of enjoyment of literature. One is as a layman, haphazardly read something just for the sake of it, enjoy it, but the impression would be vague and confused. I mean, you may have had obtained a certain idea. Confused here does not mean that you are not getting any idea of the book at all. You would enjoy it just as a story. You'd appreciate all the beautiful words in it, because yes, there are so many book addicts who are reading romances or sci-fis and detective fictions and all those things. Do they really care about its social implication? Do they really care about how the women are portrayed? Do they really care about the class divide focused upon in the book? Not really. Maybe very few. Yes, not to do them a disservice. We have to agree that yes, a few people may look into those as well, but then generally nobody really cares about, as a layman, nobody really cares about a book's literary aspects or its social or moral aspects. They just enjoy it for its own sake. Now there is another kind of person who reads, a trained person who is trained to look at a literary work critically. That person would look at that work methodically, and that person's impression would be clear. If the book is good, he would be clear about why it is good. Whereas a layman, he would be vague. He would simply say, hey, come on, the story was good, that's enough, more than enough story. But this person would be actually clear about it. Okay, and it would be accounted for if a certain book is really good, and if a critic says it is fantastic, there is no other book like that. He would actually prove it. He could prove the point by taking instances from that book. And that approach would be critical. Critical as in he would go with a questioning mind. Here criticism here implies questioning mind. Okay? Who is a critic? A critic is an ideal reader. Now come on, I understand there are two kinds of ideal, as in IDLE, ideal reader, who just enjoys reading, and okay, I'm not casting judgment on those people, but here we are talking about ideal reader, as in a reader who really reads well. Okay, not just the surface reading, but the deeper meaning. Looks at points where the book would contradict itself. Looks at point where the book would be morally or socially corrupt. It would look at all those things, all the nuances, literary devices in it. Okay, whether it be it would look at all the component parts of a literary work and find out how well they gel together, or how discordant they are. That ideal reader would have traveled much in realms of gold. Realms here, worlds. Worlds of gold is in worlds of treasure. Here, what is the treasure here? We're talking about books. And we're talking about quality books, good books, classics. Yeah? When you read classics, when you read a lot of good books, I'm not talking about trash. Okay, fine, I shouldn't call any book trash. But still, if you have read a certain standardized books of certain standard, you would be much able to appreciate any book that comes your way now. You would know whether it is good or not. So you have to refine your judgment. A critic has to be refined. Now, trained judgment is it? Yes, that person has to be trained. You don't really have to go into a training center and get trained. What you need to do is, how do you get trained? You get trained by practice, experience. So that person would form a judgment based on experience. That person would read and read and read and cultivate that his or her own mind to the extent that they'd be immediately able to judge whether a book is good or not. Alright? That person, the critic, has to be unbiased and objective. Here, objective does not mean not being emotionally disengaged. Okay, we have this very simple, an oversimplification of the word objective. No, we're not talking about that kind of objective. We're talking about the kind of objective where even though you are emotionally engaged, you're still capable of looking at its pros and cons. The critic has to be unbiased. In that sense, he has to be objective. He cannot go into work stating that the writer has always created trash. This book is not going to be any good. No, he cannot do that. He has to go into it objectively. He has to, maybe there has been some kind of improvement. Maybe that person has learned something from it, or maybe there are so many. Shakespeare himself has created so many plays. And I myself, I cannot talk about the general public, but I myself like certain plays, and some seem too preposterous. Yeah. So, and you cannot go into work stating this is enjoyable, that is unenjoyable, this is meaningful, that is meaningless. He cannot state all of this. He can state all of this only after thorough examination. WO here states means without. He cannot go to state that any work is good or bad without thorough examination. He has to look into it closely, understand it, find out if it is really, really good. Because see what happens, like, there are times you may have read certain work when you were a teenager. Yeah? And then you grow up. Over a period of time, you read many other books. And then when you once again, you think back, okay, fine, I like that book at some point. Why don't I go and read it again? And you find it's, oh my goodness, did I really like this book? No way. Happens with the best of us. Yeah? Because what happens by reading and reading better books, good books, standard books, we tend to cultivate our mind, cultivate our tastes, refine our tastes. So once we achieve a certain refinement, it's like eating biryani for some time, and later on you're given not merely biryani but all the finer dishes, whether vegetarian or non-vegetarian, and then you're made to eat maybe roti and rasam. It wouldn't really, I don't know, I wouldn't like it. I can't say for everyone, but you get my point, right? So what happens is, like, at one go or without really giving it much thought, if you read things, you can enjoy it as a layman, but you won't be able to form a proper judgment of the work. You will be ill-informed about the work. Alright? You have to have refined taste. At the same time, look at it deeply, read it thoroughly. Only then you can claim to be a critic. Now, a critic questions everything. A critic cannot simply go ahead and say, go ahead and accept everything that is there in the book. In fact, he doesn't trust anything. He has to question everything. And he has to apply close scrutiny. As I said, thorough examination, close scrutiny is almost the same. Now, what is criticism? Criticism is born of questioning. As I implied in the last slide, criticism is born of questioning. You question and you find out so many answers. One question can have multiple answers, right? So criticism is born of questioning. And of course, this questioning could bring about unprecedented answers that you may never have thought of, you'd never imagined existed. But that's how so many theories came into existence. Everything is interrogated, nothing is sacrosanct. Okay, why this particular thing is mentioned here is because there was a time when everything was questioned. The society, the economy, the politics, um, everything, the class struggle, everything was questioned except for religion. But now nothing is sacrosanct. Nothing is sacrosanct. Nothing is held sacred anymore. Even Bible is questioned. Even all the translations, all the the religious scriptures related to it, everything is questioned. The approach is entirely scientific. Now, this may be a little misleading, this word here, because it would mean that there is no emotional entanglement here at all, which is not quite possible when you're dealing with literature. Everyone is associated. It's not clinical. It cannot be a clinical process, reading something. But then you make it as scientific as is possible. It has to be a disinterested application to its subject to understand and interpret it fully. See, when we speak of disinterested, it does not mean uninterested. When we say like I'm not interested in so and so thing. No, I'm not interested in going to a movie. I'm not interested in taking a selfie. No, that we're not talking about that kind of disinterest. We're talking about the objectivity, the unbiased state of mind. Yeah, unprejudiced state of mind. So it has to be a disinterested application to its subject to understand and interpret it fully. So see, if I maybe if I don't like Milton, okay, maybe I hadn't liked Paradise Lost. Okay, everyone likes Paradise Lost, I believe. If I hadn't liked Paradise Lost, if I shouldn't discard the idea that even Paradise Regained is going to be bad. Okay, Milton lovers, please don't kill me. Now, the requirements of so what you need to do is you need to apply your disinterested application to the subject and try to understand it and interpret it fully without any bias. So what is the requirement? What is the need here? Is intellectual freedom. Intellectual freedom, as in you need the freedom to think. So you may wonder, who is stopping me from thinking? Well, actually, all our minds are, to a certain degree, arrested, restricted through conditioning. One simple example, I will tell you. We have been shown all these models, tall, fair, sleek hair, hourglass figure, all these models, okay, showing skin. And well, I don't have anything against them, but then the idea perpetrated through media, whether it be a magazine or whether it be your a social website or anything for that matter, you see them so much, so often, you start considering it as a norm. I think that is it. That is how a woman is supposed to dress. That is how a woman is supposed to look. That is the color of the skin that is supposed to exist. I mean, that is the one norm that you have set. That is the one yardstick we set with which we measure everything. I don't know. I really don't know. Our minds are constricted in certain ways, not just merely in terms of the example stated here, but in so many ways. We are made to think that pizza is good. We are made to think that, okay, it's an exotic dish that we need to eat it, and it's like it's a fancy food. Yeah. What is happening here is a mental conditioning. We are conditioned to think in a certain way. We are conditioned to think in a certain way, as in we are not being given intellectual freedom. We are being given a certain set of books and we are told to read that alone. Why not read? I mean, there is no harm in reading the books that has been prescribed for you. You have to read them. But why not read other books as well? Why not include other subjects as well? The intellectual freedom should be there, and it could develop only when you have a broader sense of the world. Okay? You cannot be narrow-minded. If you are narrow-minded, you are not fit to be a critic. You cannot criticize a work properly, right? You cannot justify your criticism. So this intellectual freedom would mean the freedom to think beyond the conditioning that is happening around us. The freedom for question and inquiry. So this is an individual process. Intellectual freedom is an individual process, whereas freedom for question and inquiry is a collective process. Yeah, because you would be able to question and inquire only when there are, when there is a support system around you, when there are intellectuals around you who are capable of answering those questions or discussing those questions around you, who are capable of inquiring them or allowing you to inquire. So these are the basic requirements for any kind of criticism to flourish. So what would be the limitations of that of criticism, of any critic? First of all, the trend of the age. As in, every age has its own standard. Each age has its own standard of criticism and creativity. Everyone is a slave to their own age. And age having its own standard of criticism, in the sense, see, I like the age I live in. We are all, can you think of every time a teenager tells his mom, really, there were people living without electricity in their time? Did grandma really didn't have a light in her house? Hey, how did you manage to live without an iPhone or an iPad? We are addicted to the age we live in. And to be frank, this is not something that is, specific to our age alone. It happens in every single age. Okay? Wordsworth would have thought the same thing about Johnson or Samuel Johnson or Shakespeare. Every age thinks that their age is the best. And they have their own standard of criticism. They have their own standard of creativity. They create in their own way. Because see, what happens is, like, what is literature but a reflection of the society? So as the society evolves or changes, so does creativity. So does criticism. It has to. It's a natural process. Again, it should not stop you from appreciating the one that is already gone. Okay? So everyone is a slave to their own ages, and like we believe that our age is what is the best. Now, attitude and conditioning of the critic. So each critic has his or her own individual approach. Come on, we have to agree that no two persons are same, no two people are same, no two people's minds, their tastes, their ideas, their philosophies of life. No two people are similar in any way. So their preferences, a critic's preference may vary in terms of morality and aesthetic pleasure. One critic may think that morality is more important. A book has to have a certain social value. It has to have a certain moral value in it. It should propagate certain amount of social reform. Another critic may say that no, it just has to provide aesthetic pleasure. All its component parts should come together to give pleasure. Again, in terms of the manner in which the books are written, one may say that it has to conform to the classics. Yeah, the rules of the classics are best, Latin, Greek, and Roman classics. Another may say that deviation and innovation is what is required. It is necessary to deviate from the rules. Innovation is important. Again, the principles, in terms of principles, they may be similar, dissimilar, even contradictory. So the preferences may vary from person to person, from a critic to critic. Often, critical canons of one age have been discarded in another, and often too a subsequent age has revived them. You need to remember this, because see, this is crucial here to remember that the critical canons as in all the works that are often repeated, are often, the great works that have entered the Hall of Fame and are held, on a pedestal. Here we're talking about not literary canons, but critical canons. So the criticism of one age may seem outdated to the subsequent age. They may have discarded it, okay, and a new set of criticism might have emerged. But again, another subsequent age could possibly revive them once again. It's just fashion returning once again. Now, forms of criticism. There are plenty of literary, forms of literary criticism, but here we are looking at roughly 3 kinds of literary inquiry. One would be legislative criticism, another aesthetic criticism, and the third would be descriptive criticism. Now, legislative criticism is something that is also very similar to prescriptive criticism. Okay, prescriptive criticism would be that prescribes rules, that tells you what are the rules that you need to follow to create a good work of art. Yeah. So legislative criticism is something that lays down rules to a writer to create a work of art. Now so where do these rules come from? So any work of literature is measured against the standard. Okay, a standard, most often Greek and Roman. Okay, the standard would be Greek and Roman. Why? Because they are considered to be far more enduring than any other work of literature. Alright, so this addresses the writer, as in there are plenty of different ways of criticism. Some are reader-centric, some look at close analysis of the work, that are intrinsic. Here it deals with the creative process, it deals with the writer himself. So most of the practitioners were from Elizabethan age and the 18th century critics, except for a few. Rest of them they went towards descriptive criticism and aesthetic criticism, but most of the Elizabethan critics were practitioners of this kind of criticism. Now the catchword, something you need to you could remember this legislative criticism, is that critic knows best. Okay, so if I write poetry and I ask my friend to read it, who do you think knows better about that work? My friend or me? Well, I may imply something, she may understand something else entirely different. Yeah. Well, of course, language is a fluid concept, and we'll talk about that later. But the point is that it seems it's too preposterous. It's too it's presumptuous to assume that the critic knows better than the writer. At least, in my opinion, it is quite presumptuous. Now, aesthetic criticism. What is aesthetic criticism? Aesthetics, you all know, implies beauty, a kind of artistic satisfaction. So here we're talking about aesthetic criticism, where literature is just treated as an art form and nothing else. It does not subscribe to any kind of rules. It is believed by the practitioners of this criticism that writing is an independent activity of mind. Their objective is to probe the nature of the literary art. Whatever work they are taking up, whatever genre they are taking up, whether it be fiction or prose or poetry, whatever it is, or even a journal, they look into the nature of the literary art, okay, and appreciate the literary art, and they try to process and formulate theory. See, these are the ones who are the precursors of the modern theorists, actually. Okay, what happens is prescriptive criticism is sort of outdated. Nobody wants to subscribe to it anymore. Here, aesthetic criticism gave freedom to the writer to write in any way they wanted, in whatever they wanted. Only thing is that they looked into all the beautiful components, all the finer nuances of the literary work, and device theories relating to them. So most of the practitioners were, they were practitioners of this kind of criticism in all ages. Sydney from 16th century, Dryden 17th, Edison 18th, Coleridge 19th. These all belong to different eras of time, but still periods of time, but still they practice this form of criticism. Now the catchword for this particular criticism would be art for art's sake. It may or may not be detached from moral, social, political and scientific end. See, it has to provide aesthetic satisfaction. Alright? If a work is providing furthermore, it is creating social reform, it is creating a certain political revolution, or it has some scientific end to it, well and good. It's just a bonus. But the main purpose would be for it to provide aesthetic satisfaction, and these people look into all the components that bring about that kind of satisfaction. Okay. Now descriptive criticism. What is descriptive criticism? Again, it describes, as opposed to prescriptive criticism that gives rules. Descriptive criticism describes the kind each work. Okay, individual works of writing or writers. As in, they take up, just a book of a certain writer, or take up a writer and consider all the books written by that person. Their aims, methods, and effects. Why the book was written, the method in which the book was written, and the effect it had on people, on the readers. So this is the latest and most popular method of criticism. There is no denying that. It is still practiced in every single classroom all over the world, wherever literature is being taught. Yeah. Wherever English literature or any Urdu, Tamil, whatever language it be, we all subscribe to this kind of criticism because we describe it. We love to describe it. So the practitioners of descriptive criticism were Ben Jonson, Dryden, Wordsworth, and there are plenty others, but I've just mentioned here because these people popularized this method of criticism. Ben Jonson's conversation, I have just given part of the title here. The entire title would be Conversations with Drummond, and Dryden's plenty of prefaces. It's not just one work. Whatever Dryden wrote, he wrote preface for them. Apart from that, he wrote other literary work, critical work as well. And Wordsworth's preface, this is one seminal work that changed the face of writing poetry. So he wrote this preface of lyrical verse. See, Dryden and Wordsworth wrote, all these people wrote to defend their work, explaining their work. So it was kind of like, explaining their own work. And Dryden did for others as well. Anyway, it may involve both legislative and aesthetic norms. So it is not exclusive, descriptive criticism is not exclusive, saying that, okay, it has to stand alone. It requires actually, both legislative prescriptive rules and aesthetic norms as well to, describe a work. The catchword you may remember, because I just invented this for the sake of it. The book says all. The book says all is in the sense that you don't really have to rely on external rules laid down by someone else for creativity, and neither do you have to completely satisfy someone else. There is worry about aesthetic satisfaction of someone else. Descriptive criticism, the critics, they just deal the book as it is. They look at the book itself and look at what the writer has to say. The intent of the writer, intent as in what the writer wanted to communicate, the methods that are employed, and the reception by the reader or the critic to some extent, that is an impact of the work on the socio-political aesthetic domains. So see, it may be collective, it may include all of these, or we just deal with one or 2 points of it. Beginnings. Now we come towards the end and we deal with the beginnings, because this is the introductory part. So where did criticism begin? So it was initiated in Greece. Greece, Athens in 5th century BC. See, 5th century BC was kind of a renaissance. Okay, it was a time of enlightenment. It was a time of discourse. It was, there was so much discussion going on philosophy, religion, morality, politics, art, literature, everything. So, of course, when there is discourse, there are writers, and there's Sophocles, Euripides, Aeschylus, Socrates, Aristophanes, sorry. So all these people were there, all these writers, great writers were there, and their writing, it still stands, they are like far enduring than any others. So here, one writer of them all, Aristophanes, he was the first to apply criticism to literature, being both the critic and the artist in his book called Frogs. I haven't italicized the Frogs here. It's supposed to be italicized because it's a book name. So he was the first person to apply criticism to literature. Okay, before him nobody had thought about it, or maybe they might have done, but just not really created something that has stood for so long, that's still considered as the first work of criticism as such. So Frogs deals with a Greek theory, a story of gods and goddesses, but the main point is where Aeschylus and Euripides, both who are dead, okay, we'll not talk about the story, we're just like, this person, Aristophanes, he compares the merits of Aeschylus and Euripides. Merits of Aeschylus and Euripides as in their works. He compares their poetry, he compares their drama, and tries to figure out who is better, who is best, or whether what they have written is suitable, whether what they have written is enduring, whether the craftsmanship is excellent, or whether that craftsmanship is more important than morality in a work of art, whether the choice of language that has been adopted by both of them are good, or like their merits, their demerits. All these Aristophanes first did. Okay, so he sort of laid the ground rule for criticism, with which everyone has been working since then. So it all began in 5th century BC. So thank you for today. This is all. I hope you'd all read up and do your assignments, and we'll talk again tomorrow. Thank you.